The Death Egg? Oh man, that's not good.
None of this is good, Vector. That's why it's called war.
Ugh. Yeah, it's gonna be that kind of game, isn't it? Sonic Forces never appealed to me before its release. Just like many other fans, I was very skeptical of the trailers and other information about the game. For this reason, I never played Sonic Forces until very recently, despite having played just about every other 3D game in the series at some point. This is quite a polarizing game in the Sonic community, and that's blatantly obvious to anyone who's paid attention. Regardless, I tried to go into this experience with somewhat of an open mind instead of manipulating myself into disliking the game simply because of its negative reputation. But after playing the game for myself, I consider it to be just as soulless and forgettable as I was led to believe. This is one of the most forgettable experiences I've ever had playing a video game. It only took me 3 hours to finish the game, and by the 2-hour mark I was practically begging for it to be over so I can move on with my life. That said, I don't want to do what the majority of people do with Sonic games and just say, "This is terrible," without explaining why. I want to really break this down for you guys and explain why Sonic Forces isn't just a disappointment, it's a failure. So without any more build-up, let's start with the story. The plot kicks off with Eggman bitching about how much he hates Sonic and claiming he's created some fancy new machine that will finish Sonic for good this time. Yeah, that's really how this story starts. Easily the most bland intro of any 3D Sonic game. Seriously, how did we go from the amazing intros of Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Unleashed to this trash? After the opening cutscene ends, you are immediately thrown into the first stage of the game, which is another fucking Green Hill stage, and oh boy do I have some issues with the locales featured in this game, but let's just stay focused on the story for now. Sonic returns to the city just in time to save Tails and company from Eggman's attack, but Eggman turns the table by revealing he's gathered a bunch of Sonic's rivals to fight for his cause, and wow, you can just feel the originality in the story, can't ya? Sonic attempts to fight off his enemies, but their combined strength is way too much for him, and he proceeds to get his ass kicked handily. The game then cuts away from the action for some reason and gives you some lazy as hell text explaining that Eggman and his army took over after defeating Sonic, and a small group of Resistance members are trying to keep the fight going. And this is the first example of a huge problem this game has. Sonic Forces has way too many instances of telling but not showing storytelling. Seeing Eggman's army taking over and subjugating the majority of the world could have been really interesting if that process were actually shown to the player. Instead, we get this lazy, boring cutaway dialogue that does nothing other than demonstrate the writers had no idea how to continue the story from there. After that, we get a scene of Sonic's friend going over the current situation, trying to come up with a plan to strike back against Eggman. And they get help from none other than the Avatar. No, not that Avatar. This Avatar. Of course, this would have been a great opportunity to introduce a new character to the series for the player to control in this game, but that would have required effort, so why not throw in this boring-ass create a character mechanic instead? The Resistance gets news that Sonic is still alive, and they hatch a plan to rescue him. Elsewhere, Tails is interrupted in his attempts to repair E123 Omega by the arrival of Chaos, and Tails deals with this problem just like a battle-hardened soldier would. Yeah, real fucking brave there, Tails. Sonic has clearly taught you a lot. Before Chaos can snap Tails' neck, though, Sonic shows up to save the day, only it's classic Sonic. Okay, I'm not going to go into a rant about classic Sonic's inclusion in this game yet. Let's just keep it moving for now. We then get a flashback of Eggman's latest creation wiping out a bunch of Resistance fighters, leaving only the Avatar alive. I'm supposed to feel some sort of connection to the Avatar here, but I don't. This moment is completely inconsequential and doesn't affect the story at all, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Meanwhile, the group rushes to rescue Sonic before Eggman jettisons him out into space execution style. Only that's not really necessary since Sonic escapes on his own courtesy of Zavok being the worst prison guard imaginable and Eggman not thinking to bind Sonic's feet for some reason. Sonic links up with the Avatar and they make their way off the Death Egg using one of Eggman's leftover ships, which Sonic totally knows how to fly for some reason. Sometime later, Silver is doing battle with the same enemy that beat down Sonic at the beginning of the game, and since his fighting skills haven't improved since Sonic 2006, he gets his ass whooped easily. Sonic shows up to take the heat off Silver, and the enemy reveals himself as Infinite, not like it matters because the game spoils Infinite's name before you even start the fucking boss fight. Sonic gains the edge over Infinite initially, but Infinite counterattacks and leaves Sonic in a dazed and defenseless state. But rather than, doing the intelligent thing and finishing Sonic off while he's weak, Infinite just spouts some arrogant crap and then fucks off. Wow, these villains just get smarter and smarter, don't they? Infinite meets with Eggman to discuss the next phase of the plan while Tails and Classic Sonic eavesdrop on them. On a side note, how the fuck does Eggman not see these two watching him? Is he blind? Tails overhears Infinite talking about his encounter with Sonic, cluing Tails into Sonic still being alive. Though I have to wonder how Tails didn't already know that. Did Knuckles and the others really not inform Tails that they found Sonic on the Death Egg and that he returned to Earth? How was the Resistance this bad at communication? Classic Sonic gives Eggman the beatdown, but Eggman is unmoved, claiming his plan will eliminate the Resistance in just 3 days. Leave a comment if you know what Sonic game that's a reference to. Tails and Classic eventually make their way back to the base, and Tails and Sonic have their little reunion. It's worth noting that Sonic sees his younger self hanging around and doesn't bother to ask one question about how or why his younger self is back in this timeline. It's almost like the writers thought that if they just didn't bring attention to all the unexplained things in the story, then players just magically wouldn't notice them. Vector radios back to HQ telling Knuckles and company that Shadow has attacked the Resistance troops, which further illustrates the stupidity of Knuckles not radioing Tails to tell him Sonic was alive, but I don't want to keep harping on the same point, so let's just continue. Sonic catches up to Shadow only for Shadow to attack him, but before Shadow can land his attack, another Shadow uses Chaos Control and reveals the Shadow that attacked was a fake generated by Infinite. Knuckles then learns that Eggman's forces have spread themselves too thin, leading to the capital of Eggman's empire, Metropolis, being vulnerable to attack. And I'm sorry, but I have to point out the fact that this makes no sense. I get that Sonic's return has buffed up the Resistance to some extent, but at this point, Eggman still controls the majority of the globe. How could his troops possibly be spread thin enough to leave the capital insufficiently defended? It's just lazy writing to give the heroes an opportunity to win because that's how the story needs to end. Tails also comments that by destroying the Phantom Ruby, Infinite's source of power, they should be able to send Classic Sonic home. I have no idea why Tails reached the conclusion that Classic Sonic and the Phantom Ruby are related other than for the sake of the plot, so whatever, let's just move on. The Avatar takes place in the assault on Metropolis and he does battle with Infinite, with the latter emerging victorious. And you guessed it, Infinite just leaves instead of capitalizing on his advantage. I really can't stand narratives where the heroes only have a chance to win because of the villains being incompetent. The attack on Metropolis as a whole fails due to the Resistance troops being controlled by the power of Infinite's Phantom Ruby. Okay, serious question here. Why the hell did Knuckles and the others make the decision to attack Metropolis without a way to deal with the Phantom Ruby's powers? They had to know it would be a problem since Tails was well aware of the Phantom Ruby being a thing, and Shadow points out that Infinite can use his powers to create fake projections of just about anything he wants. So why did the heroes not account for this? Choosing to attack without a way to deal with your enemy's strongest resource is the definition of being a dumbass. Knuckles is a dumbass. Tails forms a plan to travel to the Death Egg and destroy the Phantom Ruby's power source to cripple Infinite. After some more tedious as fuck levels, the group manages to destroy the Death Egg, significantly weakening the Phantom Ruby's power. Eggman is predictably irritated by this, but I have to wonder why he didn't do anything to prevent it. I mean, shouldn't he have known something was up when the Death Egg's main power supply was destroyed? Why didn't he investigate the situation further? With the Phantom Ruby believed to be useless, the heroes decide to attack Metropolis a second time, although I have no idea how the Resistance has the resources to do this since Knuckles said the majority of their forces were wiped out in the first attack.
80% of our forces have been wiped out, and we've lost contact with the rest.
One flip of the Phantom Ruby switch and everything falls apart on us.
The rookie is our only hope now.
Sonic and Tails catch up to Eggman and Infinite, and Infinite uses some dark energy to send Sonic into a void known as null space, with the Avatar being sucked in as well in a last-ditch attempt to save Sonic. That doesn't really matter though, since Sonic and the Avatar just run really fast and they get out of null space like it's nothing. Even with all the complaining I've done about the story up until now, this is probably the plot point that pisses me off the most. Why in the hell did the game make such a big deal out of Sonic getting sent to null space if the issue was going to be resolved that quickly? I'm not exaggerating here. Sonic and the Avatar are trapped in null space for less than 30 seconds. Why did they even bother with this plot point? It meant absolutely nothing. We then get treated to a really awful cutscene featuring a big battle between the Resistance and Eggman's troops, culminating in Infinite preparing to drop the sun on the world and vaporize the entire planet. Eggman laughs his ass off at this point, thinking he's won, but is he really dumb enough not to realize that Infinite's plan will kill him too? And don't give me any of that, oh, Eggman isn't under the Phantom Ruby's control bullshit. The world is either destroyed or it's not, period. Anyway, the Avatar uses a Phantom Ruby prototype to prevent the sun from crashing into the Earth somehow, and the Resistance prepares for its final push to take down Eggman. Sonic defeats Infinite for the last time, then spits out some cheesy lines about how nothing can beat the power of friendship, which is a message that really doesn't work in a story with these kinds of themes, but I digress. Sonic teams up with his younger self and the Avatar to take down Eggman's final robot, and the Resistance celebrates its hard-won victory. Classic goes back to his own time, and Sonic lets out some thinly veiled social commentary about how fixing the world is really important. And yup, that's it. That's all for this completely forgettable and uninspired story that only took me 3 hours to finish. I'm not sure if you've caught on to this by now, but I didn't really enjoy this story that much. There wasn't a single moment in the entire narrative that I was genuinely interested in. I know I pointed out a lot of the plot holes and stupid inconsistencies already, but there are a few more things I want to cover, starting with the story's tone. It's very clear from the beginning the writers wanted the story to have a darker tone similar to Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic 2006. And to be clear, that itself is not a bad thing. In fact, I tend to enjoy the Sonic stories with darker narratives more because I find them to be more interesting than just the garden variety Eggman is being mean, we need to go stop him crap that some Sonic games feature. In the case of Sonic Forces, however, the darker tone doesn't work because the writers didn't fully commit to it. Sega is well aware by now of the fact that not every fan enjoys the darker storylines in Sonic games, and if you don't, then fair enough, that's your opinion. But a story like this doesn't work when you have a mosh pit of lighthearted and darker events mixed together. If you're going to tell a story about a small group of resistance fighters overthrowing an evil empire, then you have to buy into the darker implications of that instead of breaking the immersion every 2 minutes to throw in some overly optimistic and out-of-place dialogue that directly clashes with the greater narrative the game is attempting to tell. And the biggest violator of this principle is none other than Sonic himself. Knuckles claims that Sonic has been captured by Eggman and that he's been tortured non-stop for 6 months. But when we actually see Sonic for the first time after he was captured, he seems perfectly fine. He doesn't have a scratch on him, and his mental state is just as cheery as it usually is. I can guarantee if I was tortured for 6 months, I would not be 10% as cheery as Sonic is in this cutscene, and neither would any of you. To bring up another example, Silver says this about Tails early on in the game.
Sonic is gone, Amy, and Tails has just lost it.
But when we next see Tails, guess what? He's perfectly fine. So what was Silver talking about? He was implying that Tails had some sort of massive mental breakdown or that he entered a depressive state, but none of that is actually shown to the player. These are massive instances of telling but not showing storytelling, and the worst part is it doesn't feel like an oversight, it feels deliberate. As if the writers wanted to tell a story with darker moments to cater to the people who wanted that, but they also decided to keep these moments very surface level in order to not push away the fans of the lighthearted stories, and as a result, the story is severely lacking in context. There are events within this story that could have been interesting, but nothing is done with them. The idea of Eggman taking over the entire world and subjugating the majority of the population could have been interesting, but nothing is done with it beyond the bare minimum, so it just falls flat. Tails trying to recover from a terrible mental collapse after the supposed death of his best friend could have been interesting if the writers actually explored it more. But instead, we just get one throwaway line from Silver and we're supposed to take the writer's word for it that something noteworthy happened. Infinite could have been an interesting villain if he had a character arc beyond just, I'm really scary and you should be afraid of me. Don't just tell me that Infinite is scary or intimidating. Show me. I actually think Mephiles was a better Dark Sonic villain because he didn't have to tell you that he was serious. He shows you. He stabs Sonic straight through the back, making it very clear that he is not fucking around. He is going to accomplish his goals, and anyone who gets in the way is going to die. I never really get that with Infinite. He shows up, talks shit, gets his ass beat, leaves, lather, rinse, repeat until he loses for the final time and fucks off for good. And to add one final point about the tone, there are times where characters just seem completely out of touch with their situation, like in this cutscene.
Well, look who's back from the dead. The little blue savior. But what's that I smell? You reek of fear. Glad to see I left an impression.
That's not fear. I ran all the way over here.
Lines like this just make Sonic sound dense. I mean, I can't tell if he was playing along with the joke or if he was taking what Infinite said literally. Honestly, neither option is good. Okay, I've said enough about the tone, now let's get into some other problems. What the hell is going on with the presentation of the cutscenes in this game? Don't get me wrong, the game does have some traditional cutscenes, but the majority of the dialogue is fed to you using these lazy, bland character portraits with nothing to look at other than the world map screen, which is about as interesting as watching all the Twilight films back to back. Guys, this presentation isn't just lackluster, it's awful. This is something I would expect to see from an indie game, and even then, there are indie games that do this style of cutscene way better than Sonic Forces does. This is not something that is acceptable for a long-established series with a shitload of funding and resources. I expect more than this from a Sonic game, and you should too. I wouldn't mind these character portrait cutscenes so much if they were used as supplemental material for the bulk of the story, rather than as a lazy way of dumping exposition onto the player in the most boring way possible. I know this is going to be a divisive opinion, but I really believe Sonic Forces would have benefited a lot from having hub worlds. That way, you could actually explore the world in its decimated state and interact with the individuals who have had their lives ruined by Eggman's influence. Depending on the execution, that may not have been great either, but it certainly would have been better than what we actually got. I do want to take a brief moment to talk about the game's UI. Long story short, it's got problems. What did you expect? The worst offender is probably the world map. This game provides a perfect example of how not to do a stage selection screen. If you're going to have an interactive map like this as opposed to simply a list of stages to pick from, you need to make the map easy to discern and navigate. There were plenty of cases where I was just wandering around the screen aimlessly looking for the next stage, but I couldn't find it because everything on the map looks the same. Sonic Adventure 2 uses a stage selection screen like this, but in SA2, the map is colorful and full of easy to identify locations that allow you to quickly find the stage you're looking for without wandering around. And given that SA2 does this so well, it's really baffling to me that it's done so poorly in this game. Also, having to mash the A button 20 times after finishing every stage is really annoying. After you complete a stage, you unlock new clothing items for your avatar to wear. More on the avatar itself later, but for every item you get, you have to hit the A button to move on to the next item, and because you get so many items at one time, you have to mash the A button endlessly in between stages when you're just trying to get a move on with the game. This might seem like a really small nitpick, and in the grand scheme of things, this problem is nothing compared to other issues the game has that are far worse. But the main reason this irritates me so much is because it's a problem that was so easily fixable. Just show me one pop-up indicating that I've obtained new items and then let me go look at them when I feel like it. Don't bombard my screen with repetitive notifications after every single stage. I could go on, but I think I've talked about the story and presentation long enough, and I don't want to keep rambling for too long. This story is a disorganized mess that attempts to tackle more mature themes, but it does so in the most bare-bones way possible, and everything about it is completely forgettable as a result. The presentation of the information sucks, the tone is all over the place, and the characters spend more time engaging in a competition to see who can be the biggest dumbass than anything else. This narrative is just bad, guys. Given what I experienced, I can't possibly reach any other conclusion. It's just bad. Okay, now that we got through that shit show, let's jump straight into another shit show and talk about the actual gameplay, because this is still a video game at the end of the day. Let's address the really big elephant in the room first. Why the fuck is Classic Sonic in this game? There was absolutely no reason for him to be a part of it, and that's made even more clear when examining his gameplay. As someone who isn't nearly as big a fan of the classic games as many other Sonic fans are, when I found out Classic Sonic was going to be in this game, I rolled my eyes pretty hard. In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons why I didn't buy the game at launch. Classic Sonic's gameplay is functional, but it lacks personality or ambition. To start, he doesn't control that well. He controls much better in Sonic Generations. His jump is probably the worst issue. He always seems to have either way too much momentum or not enough momentum. He never quite hits the sweet spot. His level design is really, well, forgettable. I know I keep using that word a lot to describe the contents of this game, but most of it is just that, forgettable. There wasn't a single moment in any classic Sonic stage that really got me excited to see what was up next, and it's clear he was only included to pacify fans of the 2D games, which I don't understand at all since Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania provided 2D fans with plenty of content. So why did Classic Sonic get forced into this game? He just doesn't fit in with the rest of the game's content, and most importantly, all he did was take away valuable development time from modern Sonic's gameplay, who clearly needed it. Modern Sonic's gameplay is certainly better than classic Sonic's, but not by much. The biggest reason I give modern Sonic the edge is that his gameplay feels a lot more natural for the type of game this is. You play as an actual character, however flawed he may be, as opposed to a mute that has no place in a game with this type of narrative structure. However, modern Sonic's gameplay isn't really fulfilling, and it's certainly not fun. The sense of speed achieved in other games such as Unleashed and Generations just isn't present here. I think even Lost World does a better job of providing a consistent sense of speed because despite Sonic's slower overall speed in that game, his controls are better and there are more tricks you can use to keep the pace going. In Forces, if you aren't boosting as modern Sonic, you aren't going anywhere since Sonic takes forever to pick up speed when he's not boosting. It's like he's trying to walk through mud. On top of that, his levels feel way too automated compared to previous adventures in the series. Most of the time when you're exploring levels in 3D, you're either watching automated sequences or you're being funneled down straight lines that give you little to no decisive input. You can control Sonic during these portions, but his control is so stiff. Every time I tilted the control stick left or right, it felt like the game was actively fighting against my input. Challenges such as drifting around a corner, which were completely under your control in games such as Unleashed and Generations, are completely automated in this game. It's like the developers weren't confident in their own controls and physics, so they decided to just automate next to everything. There's no serious thought required to get through modern Sonic stages. You just hold either forward or right and boost until the stage ends. His levels basically play themselves. To play devil's advocate for a moment, some people would probably argue that 3D Sonic games, at least those after the adventure games, all have this problem of too much automation and therefore Forces isn't any worse off in that regard. But I would passionately disagree with that point of view. Sonic Unleashed has a lot of automated sequences, sure, but it also has a lot of moments where you really have to pay attention to what's going on in order to not fuck up. If you don't react to the level design quickly and appropriately, you will die. And while that makes Sonic Unleashed somewhat difficult at times, it also makes it a far more satisfying and immersive experience than Forces. In Unleashed, you don't have the luxury of just holding boost until you reach the end of the stage, at least not if you want to reach the end without dying 20 times. In Forces, that challenge isn't there, not only because you don't have lives, but also because nothing in this game really poses a threat to Sonic, so it just feels way too easy. So you turn your brain off and you don't really process anything. Everything just blends together in an incredibly bland and unsatisfying way. It's just one forgettable level after another until the credits eventually roll and your suffering ends. I don't have much else to say about modern Sonic's gameplay. It still follows that standard Sonic formula, but not in a way that's unique or special. If you watched my review of Sonic Lost World, you know that I don't exactly love that game, but I do consider it to be a solid experience, and I would recommend trying it out if you're curious. Sonic's gameplay in Lost World, while not perfect, is miles better than his gameplay here, since Lost World has levels that are actually fun. But in this game, they're just, you guessed it, forgettable. Don't think I forgot about the avatar, though. You don't just play as Sonic and his younger counterpart, you also get to play as a bland and boring avatar that you'll make using the most underwhelming create-a-character system I've ever seen in a video game. Seriously, Madden games have better create-a-character features than this, and if features in your game are worse than those in a Madden game, you really fucked up. I won't go into any more detail about it, but it's really a pathetic piece of garbage. Anyway, the Avatar's gameplay is essentially modern Sonic with a different character model. You can't boost, but since the stages are so automated, you probably won't even notice that when you play. The only difference worth mentioning is that the Avatar has access to these abilities called Wispons. Think of them like Ratchet's weapons in pretty much any Ratchet & Clank game, only with nowhere near as many options. I would talk about the individual Wispons and what they do, but there's really no point since they all follow one guiding principle. Hold down shoot and you'll kill everything in front of you without a second thought. And in a game that already has issues with too much automation, having weapons that require zero thought to use just piles on to an already glaring problem. I won't say anything else about the Avatar's gameplay since all of its problems are essentially identical to modern Sonic's. I will say though that I think allowing us to play as Sonic's friends would have been a much smarter choice. Getting to play as the Chaotix again could have been really cool seeing as they've been completely irrelevant since Sonic Heroes. In fact, this game would have been a good opportunity to bring back the team-based formula used in Heroes with different characters exploring levels together in small groups and switching between them to deal with whatever the current situation is. It may not have been perfect, but as I said about the hub worlds, it would have been way better than what we actually got. I wish I could say I was done criticizing this game, but we still have quite a few things to cover. I feel inclined to point out that this game reuses way too much content. Granted, every Sonic game was guilty of that in certain ways, but there are good and bad methods for recycling content within your game, and Sonic Forces definitely falls on the bad end of the spectrum. There are 30 total stages in this game, but since 6 of those stages are just boss fights, and believe me, I'll get to those later, you're left with only 24 actual stages. And that seems like a good number at face value, but once you dig deeper, it becomes really obvious how little is actually going on here. Let me just say, I really hope you like Green Hill Zone, because the very first stage in this game is a Green Hill stage, and once I saw that, I knew this game was screwed. But that's not all, because the 6th stage and the 8th stage are also Green Hill stages, and Green Hill gets its own boss fight too, yay! This isn't just a problem for Green Hill, as just about every location in this game, be it Chemical Plant, Mystic Jungle, the city, Metropolis, etc., they all have this problem of constant repeat visits, some of which take place for the dumbest reasons imaginable. Your second visit to the city is just a lazy save the civilians objective, and I might not have a problem with that if I actually got a chance to interact with some of the civilians I was supposed to be saving. This mission has no purpose in the game, and it's just there for the sake of being there. In one of modern Sonic's missions, you have to travel to the chemical plant and deactivate the Death Egg security system so it can be destroyed from the inside. But in the next mission, the Death Egg security system is still online because
probably switched over to auxiliary power.
Meaning that modern Sonic turning off the defenses in the previous mission meant absolutely nothing. Mind you, this is already the 3rd mission in the game that takes place at the chemical plant, and on top of that, it's a completely fucking useless mission. There are more examples of this I could go into, but I don't want to be redundant. There's no sense of accomplishment from completing a stage and moving on to the next one, because you're constantly doubling back to the same areas and it makes it feel like nothing's really going on. When I see this bar pop up on my screen indicating that I'm taking back areas of the world from Eggman's control, it seems like a mixed message when my actions feel completely inconsequential due to the game just sending me back to that same location later with nothing being different. The fact that this game only manages to be 3 hours long in spite of all the content it shamelessly recycles from previous games in the series is a travesty. I mean, can you imagine how long this game would be if it wasn't reusing content? It might be an hour long, if that. It feels like a collection of unused assets from previous games were jammed together as a side project that inexplicably ended up being a main release. And this problem also extends to the boss fights. I loved the Egg Dragoon boss fight in Sonic Unleashed. In fact, it's one of my favorite boss fights in the entire series. But I swear it's gotten worse with every incarnation since. In this game, it's just a boring snooze fest of jumping on the rocks to make them hit Eggman. And this boss fight takes place in Green Hill Zone, just in case you wanted to go back there for the 67th time. And oh my god, this boss fight with the Avatar against Infinite is the absolute worst. It takes forever because you're stuck there mashing the attack button until Infinite finally decides he's had enough. It takes so long. It's the worst boss fight in the game easily. Most of modern Sonic's boss fights are just about boosting into the enemy a few times. Think of it like the Egg Beetle boss from Sonic Unleashed, only way less fun and way harder to control. There's no innovation in this game. Everything is just so lazy. And speaking of lazy, why does damn near every enemy in this game have the same design? It's like the devs took the classic egg pawn design and intentionally made it worse. I swear this type of enemy makes up about 95% of the total enemies you will encounter in this game, excluding bosses. And while we're on the subject, just about every single resistance fighter in this game looks the same too. Guys, I'm not completely unreasonable. I understand that coming up with hundreds of unique character designs for a single game is simply not feasible, but they could have done better than just taking the most generic base model ever and slightly changing the features and colors. Again, it's lazy, which seems to be a recurring theme with this game. Laziness. Yeah guys, the gameplay is just as shallow as the story. I don't love every Sonic game, but even the games I'm not the most fond of, such as Sonic Adventure, Sonic 2006, and Sonic Colors, have plenty of redeeming qualities that keep them from being a total chore when I play through them. Call me crazy, but I honestly enjoyed my first playthrough of Sonic 06 way more than my first playthrough of this game. Sure, 06 is a nightmare from a technical perspective, but there are parts of the game I really like when it comes to the story, characters, and level design. But this game is just a muddy pile of boredom from beginning to end. I will probably never play it again, and I'll definitely be better off for that because it's just so fucking forgettable. If you've been considering playing this game, don't. Just don't. Don't waste your money on this garbage. The only reason why I bought it is because I got it for $10 thanks to the Steam summer sale. Normally, this game is priced at $40 on Steam, and there is no goddamn way in hell I would have bought it for that price. And after playing it, it's really easy to see that that was a good decision on my part. I didn't go into Sonic Forces under the expectation that I would enjoy the game. But I also didn't expect to make a 30+ minute video explaining all the issues I have with it. If you like this game and you actually watched the video all the way to the end as opposed to immediately disliking it and leaving, please go to the comments and enlighten me because I just... This game is just bad to me. It's one of the most bland experiences I've ever had playing a video game. It's just... It's unimpressive, it's lazy, it's forgettable, and it's just bad. I just think this game is just so bad from top to bottom. But with all that said, thanks for watching the review. Thanks for listening to me ramble all this time. And I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, if you made it this far, that means you watched the video all the way to the end. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you giving my video a chance, and I hope you have an amazing day. If you liked the video, consider hitting the like button or subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching, and go out and make today a special one. See you next time.